starting from the beginning. And so when I do my keynotes and everything, I base it off photos because I do have a brain injury. So when people want me to speak, there's no way I can write stuff down and then just try to read it. I can't memorize it. So what I do is I use photos to spark those memories that carries the conversation. So it's kind of a linear thing. So that's what we're going to do tonight. So if something pops up that I totally forgot was there, I'm just going to go for it. But it's going to start with me when I was actually in high school, when I was more of the kid that, I was more of the guy that you see today. That guy right there, right in the middle. Does that pointer work? Right. That's me. So I was a stud. I had a graduating class of 22 people. So I'm like the class clown. Somehow I got prom king. Obviously it wasn't about the looks. And I could do anything. I could go up in front, I could do this stuff. I could go talk to people. I could make anybody laugh. But that all changed. And it didn't take too much longer. I knew at this point in my life I was going to be in the Marines. Sorry, already getting emotional. Because 9/11 happened the same year. And that really tore me up inside. And I knew that I was going to the military, but I didn't choose Marine Corps until 9/11. I wanted to be the first person overseas. I said, I've always been optimistic about my life. And I said, why can't I be the one that gets Saddam Hussein? I was like, somebody's going to have to do it. Why can't it be me? So I signed up. 2 weeks out of high school, I went to boot camp. During boot camp, I was actually selected. I didn't know this. They said I was a special tester. And I was like, ah, crap, they know I'm dumb. I was like a special tester. And so they kept taking us. They took about 100, 200 of us just from my, of the 2 platoons that I knew. And every time we went back to these little meetings during boot camp, during 3-month boot camp, they just kept on less. So now I'm down to like, there's 20 other Marines in this room, and I'm like, what is going on? Are they killing them? I was like, where are they going? What kind of testing is this? But they told me that this was actually a selection to guard the President of the United States, either at Camp David or the White House. So I have a next photo of that, me with Bush and Laura Bush. So everything that I was about just stopped. Like I was still, this is 2003. I'm about to I'm mindset going to Fallujah. I'm going to go fight in war. And then this happens. They're like, you can go guard the president. And I was, for the longest time, I honestly didn't want to do this part of it. And I went with 1st TOW platoon. So that's me. Christmas time, good times. And so while I was over there though, within the first 4 months, my Humvee was struck 4 different times by IEDs and my best friend was shot and killed beside me. All that happened, and this is before, when you saw that photo of that kid, I was not an artist, I was not a musician, I did not play the guitar, I did not do art. The only thing I could do is draw, I could doodle. And so at this point in my life, art's not an option. I'm going through all this stuff in my head after this moment in time, and I don't know what's happening to me. I get home, and about 8 months later, I start physically throwing up. This guy you see today that could do anything, I was legitimately a recluse. When suicide is a 0, and 100 is you before war, I was at a 9. I couldn't leave the house. I couldn't do anything. The only thing I could do is go listen to music. There was times where I tried to go, I remember interviewing for trying to interview for a Delta job. I made it to the parking lot, threw up, and left. So I had a very severe problem, but I didn't know what was happening to me, but I was still super optimistic. I was like, what can I do to get me out of this funk? I know I want to get a degree. I don't know what I can do. I tried to study business, failed my first class. That's actually when I found out I had a brain injury, because I went to the VA hospital saying like, I know I'm not this dumb, what's happening to me? They told me about my brain injury. Then I went down an even darker hole. I was like, what can I do now? I can't learn new technical things. I can't do anything with my life. I was like, but I want to do something, so as long as I'm here, I'm gonna try. So what I decided to do was take an art route. I was at a local community college, Bloomington, Illinois, not doing anything. I knew I could be in a place where other people who may have social anxieties, and I could just stick to myself and nobody will ever know my story. Problem was, I had an amazing art teacher. He showed me what I could do with art and how I could use symbols and colors to show emotion. When I don't have words, the words speak for me. And so I'm gonna do a little journey through some of the very first pieces of art that I did, just to explain to you where I was at the time. So like they said, Luke Yepsen is the main reason for CreatiVets' existence. It was his memories, and it was he was weighing heavy on my mind. I needed to get off my chest. I don't want to tell you guys about it, but I want to tell you guys about it. At that time in my life, I had no words for it. I had a photo, because every single year I go back to Houston and visit his grave. And one of those weekends I went, my uncle went and he captured a photo. I took that photo and it was one of my first art pieces. I didn't want anybody to see it. I put it up. I was doing it chalk pastel, and I was just trying to get it out there. There's a point in the time where the teacher came up to me and he said, I see that you're doing everything the color is supposed to be. That's cool. But what happens when you get to the grass, which is the background, what happens to it if you do it a color that doesn't make sense to you? A different color, not green, anything, purple, pink. I was like, well, that sounds really dumb. I don't want to do that. This is a really good drawing. Have you seen it? And he really pushed it. Like, this is going to tell your story. What you do with this color chooses whether people know that this is your story or somebody else's story. And so this is the image that I ended up creating. The awesome thing about art that I didn't know at the time, if I did, I probably wouldn't have went into art. We had to do critiques. Like, we had to put stuff up and people talk about it. So when we got to the point, and my classmates had no idea what I did pre-service, they looked at it, and they looked at me first, said, Richard, do you want to talk about your piece? I was like, hell no, I'm not talking about this piece. And at this time, again, I cannot talk to people, but the students took turns critiquing it. They said, I think you used red because you were there when he died. I think you used red because you were passionate about him, because you loved him, because you were mad he died. Like, every single feeling I could ever feel was based on that color, and they drew it all out. And I was like, oh my gosh, there is something to this. I was like, how did I go from not telling my story to everybody know my story? And I just put it in I used one color. And so I jumped at this, and I went on to the next thing. I started, okay, what else can I do? I did a little painting. This is still at the community college. I did this little painting, and this is actually the same highway. It's just the highway that I saw before Luke died and the highway I saw after Luke died. And so I started telling these stories. The crazy thing was that I wanted to do this now. It was like before, when I was like not sure what I wanted to do, I wanted to do this. It was coming out of me. There was times where I felt suffocated in my fire team and I just didn't know what to do, so I'm trying to bust out. The awesome thing was, though, that 2 years that I spent at this local community college studying art, we had a rep come down from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, Walt Disney, George O'Keeffe, one of the best art schools in the country. They're like, this is what we do. I'm so art dumb. I was like, I didn't know the school existed, and it was in my own backyard. And so when I went to my teacher afterwards, after she came and told us all about it, I was like, this sounds like a pretty cool school. Should I do it? He's like, no. He was like, and he was trying to, like, it was that, you know what? People study their whole life to go to this school. He's like, or you have a lot of money, and I had neither. So I was like, you know what? Optimism. I was like, I'm gonna go, this is the only school I'm gonna apply for. I went up to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I showed them my portfolio of like 9 things, and they're like, yeah, this is all just like really basic stuff. Like, you're a good drawer, but we don't see any content. But I sold myself. I said, you know what? I was limited by the teacher I had. He was supposed to teach me this stuff. I just learned that art can heal. What I want to do when I get here is I want to show you what it's like to lose a friend. I want you to feel that. I want you to feel what it's like to have been blown up, but I want to do that through art. I want to tell you about the loss of innocence. And so they brought in someone else, and they said, hey, look at this guy's portfolio, tell him your story. I told my story. They're like, okay, you're in. And I got into the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and from that day, from that moment on, my life changed. I'm sitting here walking through this art realm, 4 years into it. Well, actually, this is right after this. This is the very first piece I ever did in ceramic. I didn't know what ceramics was. A friend of mine did ceramics, and when this is how art dumb I was. He was like, hey, you want to go down to the ceramics department? I was like, so we can play with plates? Like, what do? You stack them? Like, should we clean them? I honestly did not know what ceramics was. Again, I'm from a town of 1,100 people, like 22 in my class. There's like, our art teacher was not up to date. But this is the first thing I ever did with clay. Like, out of everything I could have done, this is the first thing I did. I didn't know how to tell people. I was still in a very bad state on my first day of class. But that all changed. I went through that class and I graduated from that school. And when I graduated from that school, that's when it was actually between that when I met Linda. I kind of looked back at my life. I was like, what has changed from point A to point B? Like, from when I was down in the dumps to where I am now. And everything was about the art. It was about telling your story without telling your story. So I'm gonna show you a quick video of a class that we did. And so after me and Linda met, we set up CreatiVets. My dream was this art program. We started with a songwriting program, which I'll get to in a minute, but my dream was this art program to allow veterans who've never done art before, combat veterans, go to the best art schools in the country, tuition free, and get taught how to transition their warrior brain to the artist brain. And so we partnered with the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. I went in there and I said, this is my dream. I want veterans to come here who have no art background at all. And they allowed it. They said, yep. A guy named Paul Coffey, vice provost at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, said, yep, and you're teaching it. I was like, whoa, slow your roll. Like, I just did, yeah, I got 2 years here. Like, let me teach your course. But he did. He's like, I want you to be a part of this. And that was a big dream of mine, was to be a part of it. Because what CreatiVets does best is the peer-to-peer mentorship. When I'm able to call a veteran on the phone and say, hey, we have this art program, 3 weeks, fully accredited, we're paying for your tuition, your housing, your food, only combat veterans, and I'm gonna teach it, and I'm a combat veteran, here's my story. I tell them my story. They're like, okay, I can trust this guy, here's my story. I'm like, well, when you come to town, you're going to school like any other person. I was like, you're gonna be, you have to follow the syllabus, you go to class, we're gonna do stuff outside of class, but it's very strict to, you're enrolled in college. So they're enrolled in college for the first time. So I'm gonna share with you this video of our 2016 class. You may hear me repeat some stuff, and you'll notice in this video how drained I look, and it's honestly because I was. As I started teaching this course, I found out that I got worse as they got better, but I was able to overcome that. Like the more veterans I've been helping, and the more positivity and the more stories I get back, it feeds me and I keep going. So you'll see, this was at the end of the 3 weeks, only our second year into it, and I was dead. But here's a little look at what that looks like. At the same parallel in my life when I was doing art, it still started in Bloomington, Illinois. I was taking a creative writing class. I was trying to get into every form of art at this point. The writing is what really started pushing me towards songwriting, because I was sitting here thinking, okay, I can have an art piece out, but I'm not sure if people are ever gonna come to it. What if I could tell my story through song so I could give it to somebody and just walk away and like let them listen to it? So the only songwriter I knew in Bloomington, Illinois was actually my buddy Brett Gillen, who is also now part of the CreatiVets team here in Nashville. And I was like, I just want to learn songwriting. I didn't tell him my story at this point. I just said, I have this need to learn songwriting. I want to write a song about some of my experience. And so he taught me the very first 3 chords on guitar and kind of gave me a breakdown on what songwriting was. So throughout this whole process of going to this art school, by the time I get to SASC, I have a song I've written for Luke by myself, but the problem was I didn't put him on that pedestal. It wasn't what I wanted to say. I couldn't still find the words for it. I was like, it's gotta be easier than this. I was like, why can't I go meet a Nashville songwriter and they could just tell me, I'll tell them my story and they could just turn it into a song like the magic it is. And so that's what happened. I was in Chicago bouncing at a bar called Joe's Bar on Weed, so a lot of people know that because it's a very famous country bar up there. Bouncing was the only jobs I could get at the time, because I would go seek out music and they'd see me and they're like, hey, you're kind of big, do you want a job? And I was like, hell yeah, because I can't do the interview process. I still had that problem with going up, that anticipation of going to one. So I got a job there, listened to music. They had this night and it was called Nashville the North Writers Round. And so first time I've ever really seen one, and I wasn't even working that night, but I remembered, I was like, I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna try to find a songwriter who's willing to help me. In that round was Mark Irwin, and he's also here tonight. I'm just not gonna point him out yet. Mark Irwin, I don't know the other 3, he probably does, but I went up to the first 2 and I said, have you ever written for a veteran or with a veteran? And to the first guy, he's like, nope. Next person, same thing, talk a little bit, nope. Get to Mark and I ask him about it. He's like, well, actually, yeah, we wrote a song with Billy Ray Cyrus called Runaway Lights about a staff sergeant coming home from Iraq. And in my head, I was like, perfect. And I was like, I have so much inside me I can't get out. I've been trying to write a song. I was like, if I could just come to Nashville, will you write a song with me? And this is Mark Irwin. I don't know how many #1s he has, but it's a ton. He wrote Al Jackson's first #1 hit. He wrote Highway Don't Care, Redneck Crazy, Singing thing. I don't know. The brain injury, but there's a lot of them. Anyways, so he said yes. Talk about optimism, like going up to this #1 writer and be like, hey, will you do this for me? He said yes. I was able to travel to Nashville and sit down with him and tell him my stories. And in 3 hours, he turned it into something so beautiful. I was like, okay, this is awesome, but how do I help other people? I was like, in this moment, I'm like, okay, I did 4 years of studying art and now I'm doing songwriting and this helped, but was this the thing that helped me or was it the art? You know how I find out? I'm gonna bring another veteran, some guinea pig. I'm gonna bring them down. So after that experience, I was randomly in Florida, PCB. I don't party, but I was at PCB, Panama City Beach, it's like the big spring break place, where I met a group called Blackjack Billy, and Jeff Copeland's also in the crowd. And I name dropped, because I already figured it out. I was like, yeah, I've written with Mark Irwin, so kind of a big deal. One and done, that's how I do it. And then I showed him a photo of Jesse Schertz, who is technically the first veteran who ever went through our program. Jesse lost his leg in Iraq and has burns over 60% of his body. He was a friend that I went to high school with. He told me he doesn't like telling a story, but I was like, this is music, and he loves music. So I said, what if I do this? Because I know Jeff, and I think Noel, I can't remember who wrote Angel Eyes with them, but they had a #1, and that was exciting to him. He was like, oh, cool, I get to go to Nashville and write with a #1 songwriter? Yeah, I'll do that, I don't even care what we talk about. And so I brought Jesse down. It's actually a photo of Jesse that we took talking about the art program. And so Jesse came and told his story. And it was crazy because Jesse is the guy that just looks down, just doesn't talk to anybody. And I still remember him just saying like, man, it's people don't see what I see when I close my eyes. People don't know that like when I have to go pee at 4 a.m., I'm crawling on the bathroom floor because I can't put my prosthetic on. People always saw me out and said like, hey man, trying to cheer me up, like you look way better than I thought you were going to and all this stuff. And so he's telling this story just like really somber and just telling the story. And then Jeff and Noel both kind of get into it and they're like, what about this? Like, hey boy, you're looking good. You know, we're glad you're back. Man, I heard you got hurt real bad. Like something like that. And Jesse just like, his head lifted up and he's like, yes. He just started like, he didn't even know what he was saying anymore, I feel like. It was just like, here's what else happened to me. Here's what, oh, Noel's back here too. What's up, Noel? Sorry, I gotta give him credit because they're pretty much, Mark was the reason this program exists. They're the reason that this program exists as well, because without Jesse coming down, I would have never known it works. That was the same time that I met Linda, because when I got her to go to lunch with me, I told her about Jesse, and I said, this is what happened. I raised like $300 on GoFundMe by myself. No thought of a nonprofit in my head. And so I brought him down, but when I came back and I was telling Linda, it just hit me. I was like, this needs to be a nonprofit.